Because sometimes you have to have courage to be willing to stand up and tell the truth. Welcome to Courage and the Constitution. I'm just a guy digging behind the headlines to get to the nuggets of truth. I'm tired of the rhetoric and the propaganda. I'm being lied to by the media. I just want to know what's going on in the world. So let's do this. If you've been watching my videos, then you know that my introduction to them is a quick mention of how I want to dig beyond the headlines to get to the facts because I'm tired of being lied to by the media. Well, that's exactly what I'm going to do in this series of videos of media lies that changed the course of this nation. Now, why did I vote for Donald Trump? Many people ask. And that's a fair question. But it's usually asked with a sense of just this utter disgust and anger and hatred. I suppose part of the reason why I voted for him is why nearly 75 million other Americans voted for him as well. And that's because they were sick of what they saw in the media doing to us all. Hell, that very reason is why I even started this channel. And believe me, I was no fan of Trump for at least a couple years. Who could be a fan of such a racist, misogynistic, homophobe, xenophobe, and other terms that I heard for the very first time through the news? To me, he was an embarrassment to this nation. He was a clown. He was a joke and a racist. So why did I vote for him then? It all began with a situation surrounding Charlottesville. If you remember, there was a group of white supremacists who gained a permit to protest the taking down of the statue of General Lee. Another group showed up to oppose them. Violence ensued. And as I watched reports on the news and read the pop-ups on my phone and in my media feeds, I read firsthand how Donald Trump said that there were good people in the KKK and neo-Nazis. Very fine people, actually, the way that it was reported. And I'm telling you, I was disgusted. Honestly, I was appalled. And this was the leader of the greatest nation in the world saying these things publicly. I thought the man was repugnant. And it was my disgust of him that drove me to jump to YouTube to find that very news conference for myself. See, I hate racism. I openly stand against racist groups of any race or creed, and I want that to be clear. Now, I was looking for more reason to disregard the man and his blatant racism. Racism just seemed to be the most perfect direction to look. So I watched him deliver his famous words, and I listened to every one, and I watched them in their full context. That is when my jaw dropped. That was the moment that I realized the media was actually lying to the country and taking what the president said completely out of context. So if you care to hear them in your own context, I'll play the 2-minute section when all this occurred at the end of this video. Now, in fact, here's the very report, and all the mainstream media networks ran the very same theme for quite some time over and over and over. Every mainstream media outlet showed the same headlines, and they used the most awful photos of the president to push their message, in some ways subconsciously. New York Times, CNN, ABC News, The Atlantic, all of them. They even here, the Miami Herald still pushes the same easily debunked lie. And it's 2 years later, 3 years later. Every single one got it wrong, and on purpose. And if I, just a normal guy, can watch the press conferences and see clearly while looking to condemn him, even through my own confirmation bias that the media was lying, I cannot help but ask why. Why were they doing this? And then it got worse. The worse it got, the clearer it became. Now, I could not believe what I was really seeing, and that bothered me. So I went to view the fact-check sites, and I saw such as this. Notice how PolitiFact gave a nice headline to let you know what they were, in fact, checking. Then they gave some context, which this image is very important to understand for 2 reasons. And it says here, on April 25th, 2019, former Vice President Joe Biden declared his 2020 candidacy for the Democratic nomination and the presidency by recalling the events in Charlottesville and Trump's comments. With those words, the President of the United States assigned a moral equivalence between those spreading hate and those with the courage to stand against it, Biden said. Remember, I said there were two reasons that was very important. The first is they mentioned the year 2019. Going through the fact check, what they have done is they included the entire transcript of the interaction between President Trump and the reporters. Then here at the end, they say more context is needed. Now, I had to scratch my head because they had all the context they needed right there, literally all of it. In fact, they're the ones that wrote it out. And what's more, with them mentioning 2019 in the early part of their article, that means they had 2 years to get a definitive answer. But these are the kind of games that these fact checkers play. And the second part that I want to mention is that section about Joe Biden and what he said. Remember, Biden has all the same information available to him. All these powerful sources, I mean, more than any of us, including myself, who could just look into these myself. Now, knowing what he knows and knowing what we know, let's look at what his platform was run on in this entire idea of a racist President Trump. And we'll take a look briefly at a couple different clips of Biden and what he says in context. So first, this one is part of his campaign advertising.
Charlottesville, Virginia is home to the author of one of the great documents in human history. We know it by heart. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. We've heard it so often, it's almost a cliche, but it's who we are. We haven't always lived up to these ideals. Jefferson himself didn't, but we have never before walked away from them. Charlottesville is also home to a defining moment for this nation in the last few years. It was there on August of 2017 we saw Klansmen and white supremacists and neo-Nazis come out in the open. Their crazed faces, illuminated by torches, veins bulging and bearing the fangs of racism, chanting the same anti-Semitic bile heard across Europe in the 30s. And they were met by a courageous group of Americans, and a violent clash ensued. And a brave young woman lost her life. And that's when we heard the words of the President of the United States that stunned the world and shocked the conscience of this nation. He said there were, quote, some very fine people on both sides. Very fine people on both sides? With those words, the President of the United States assigned a moral equivalence between those spreading hate and those with the courage to stand against it. And in that moment, I knew the threat to this nation was unlike any I had ever seen in my lifetime.
Now, let's look at what he says while looking into the eyes of Americans. After calling himself an honest man of high integrity and moral character, as he literally looks into the eyes of every American, man, woman, and child who is watching, and just outright lies to them. Here, he's not just fudging the truth, but creates this terrible, awful image and uses that lie to the American people. And he did so with such clear intention. So let's look.
It is true. The reason I got in the race is when those people, close your eyes, remember what those people looked like coming out of the fields carrying torches, their veins bulging, spewing anti-Semitic bile, and accompanied by the Ku Klux Klan. A young woman got killed. And they asked the president what he thought. He said there were very fine people on both sides. No president has ever said anything like that. It is.
Joe Biden's entire campaign, he and Kamala Harris both, they were built upon lie after lie, just this mountain of lies, including the pandering and the manipulation and the exploitation of certain minority communities in this country, shamelessly exploiting and using them to gain their vote. The media covered up any scandal in regard to the Bidens, calling it all Russian misinformation, for example. And social media was part of their strong arm, canceling and censoring people who wanted to get the facts out, including the White House and the New York Post, the oldest newspaper in this country. The entire machine was fueled by lies and twisted truth and misinformation. Just an entire mountain of lies upon which sits the throne, and upon that is Biden, and next to him is Harris, and their servants and co-conspirators are made up of those in the mainstream media and the large social media platforms out doing their bidding. That's why I created this series. The greatest lie was not just one, but that which continued to grow and perpetuate Donald Trump as an absolute, heartless, dark-souled racist who wanted destruction wished upon communities of color in this country. And that is how even groups like CBLM gained strength, which was also used to gain favor for Joe Biden and create hatred toward Donald Trump, ignoring every groundbreaking opportunity his policies and executive orders were giving to the same communities calling for his head. These facts, they should really bother you in a big, big way. And you should feel very uncomfortable with your vote if you did happen to vote for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Is Trump a perfect individual? No, far from it. Does he have his serious flaws? You betcha. But he was also the target of the largest and most egregious and most nefarious smear campaigns in this entire nation's history toward a president. It is the media who is responsible for the hatred and the deep burning anger within the people and the creation of angry irrationality and just wrathful people who refuse to look at the truth, who instead accept everything that they're being told through the media. Then you have Joe Biden, who claims he wants unity, yet he continues to perpetuate the same lies. Meanwhile, people who just watch mainstream news, they know nothing of the facts and how the media has lied to them to paint Donald Trump as this evil dictator tyrant of a man, a fascist, and all other things that they've declared. Now, Trump broke the machine, and he broke the game of the establishment. Trump threatened to expose and hurt the pockets of politicians of all stripes who profit off war, the first president in 40 years to start no new war, and even fight to bring our troops home. Peace is not profitable for those whose revenue is based on disaster, division, hatred, anger, conflict, and fear. Trump was not a part of that swamp. He did not play by their rules. His presidency threatened a lot of people, but not the average American people. The Democrats and the media had to lie. They were left with no other choice. Their very existence depended upon it. Donald Trump broke the machine when he was elected. He was never supposed to be elected, so his opponents made sure in every way possible to take him down. And this was not their only lie. I'll expose more in videos to come. But what do you think? Did you already know that the context of this media claim and what the president actually said? Or does going back and watching the narrative source change the whole narrative for you? Let me know. Let me know your views in the comments below. And if you find this content of value and you believe others would benefit from it, please like, subscribe, and share. It'll help me grow this channel and reach other people, and that will do a lot to help us all out. Now, as I promised, here are the president's words in context.
It's on both sides, sir. You said there was hatred, there was violence on both sides.
Well, I do think there's blame. Yes, I think there's blame on both sides. You look at both sides. I think there's blame on both sides, and I have no doubt about it, and you don't have any doubt about it either. And if you reported it accurately, you would say.
Neo-Nazis started this. They showed up in Charlottesville. They showed up in Charlottesville to protest.
They didn't make themselves known as you. And you had some very bad people in that group. But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group, excuse me, I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name.
Washington and Robert E. Lee are not the same.
Well, no, George Washington was a slave owner. Was George Washington a slave owner? So will George Washington now lose his status? Are we going to take down, excuse me, are we going to take down statues to George Washington? How about Thomas Jefferson? What do you think of Thomas Jefferson? You like him? Okay, good. Are we going to take down the statue? Because he was a major slave owner. Now we're going to take down his statue. So you know what? It's fine. You're changing history, you're changing culture, and you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists, okay? And the press has treated them absolutely unfairly. Now, in the other group also, you had some fine people, but you also had troublemakers, and you see them come with the black outfits and with the helmets and with the baseball bats. You had a lot of bad people in the other group too.
The press treated unfairly, sir. I'm sorry, I just didn't understand what you were saying. You were saying the press has treated white nationalists unfairly? No. I just didn't understand what you were saying.
No. There were people in that rally, and I looked the night before. If you look, there were people protesting very quietly the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee. I'm sure in that group there were some bad ones. The following day it looked like they had some rough, bad people, neo-Nazis, white nationalists, whatever you want to call them. But you had a lot of people in that group that were there to innocently protest and very legally protest because, you know, I don't know if you know, they had a permit. The other group didn't have a permit. So I only tell you this, there are two sides to a story. I thought what took place was a horrible moment for our country, a horrible moment.